We also participated at the request of Oxford Lausanne Collateral Hominid Project, which was run by Oxford University and Lausanne Museum of Zoology there in Lausanne, Switzerland. We've ended up pushing on the wrong doors quite a bit, being at the levels, working with Oxford, working with University of New Mexico and these other big groups. And we've had senators propose law trying to stop us from doing our research, and we've had all kinds of things happen.
Hey guys, make sure you watch the last part of this video to hear about all the cover-up that has gone on with the Bigfoot. So online with me, I got Robert Kryder, who came and spoke to us out at our Moon Lake gathering and did a phenomenal job, but we kind of cheated him because the sun was so bright that he really couldn't show his slides very well, and so I wanted to get his presentation again, and it was so good that I don't know if I can mention this, but I'm going to is one of the producers of Phenomicon was out there, and they come up to me when you was done, Robert, and they was pretty daggone impressed with you. So I wouldn't doubt it if you're going to get an invite to speak for them, So, but with
well,
that,
there's rumors in the wind. So.
With that said, you shared some things in there that just totally blew my mind. I thought, Bigfoot was cut and dried. Either people have seen it or not. But from what I learned from you, there's some hidden things going on, some things that are being suppressed, and that kind of blew my mind. And the information you shared, and I want to share that with the rest of everybody. So with that said, Robert, man, let's take it away on that presentation. But just everybody know that Robert, he's not just Bigfoot, that's kind of what he's known for now. But in the beginning, he was a treasure hunter. Maybe go into why what happened, why you was a treasure hunter, and then why you switched over to Bigfoot, and whatnot.
Right.
And because he's not just Bigfoot, and that's why I like Robert, man. He's well-rounded, but not only that, he's a smart guy. So with that said, Robert, take it away.
Well, as an introduction, my name is Robert Kryder, and I founded an exploration company called Kryder Exploration. We did it informally for many, many years. Cumulatively, it's probably been 35 or more years that I've been doing this work. And then formally since 1994. And in around 95, actually, I've been doing the treasure stuff for so long and all the big digs. We get into the most remote areas, and you know how it is. They go in the absolute worst places to cache stuff, so nobody will get in there or to kill you trying, and snakes and wasps and whatever. Well, that happens to also be where everything else weird gets run into. And so going in those places so much, we encountered Bigfoot a lot of times. And then, my family as well, we own a lot of big back country, and they homestead a lot of the mountains of lower Colorado and northern New Mexico, and they got glacier lakes and all that. So they had family stories, and that might be kicked off. Even what kicked off some of the treasure hunting stuff was all their stories about the stuff that they had run into and their friends and all this with treasure. And so it was kind of a mix, but I didn't do it serious until 2010. And that's because I had a big multi-billion-dollar dig, and it went sour because of greedy investors and a bunch of other stuff. And it's still sitting there right now, in situ. So I got pretty frustrated with that. And I thought, well, you know what? I got on about 2010 and saw all the stuff on Bigfoot, and I was thoroughly discouraged. And people enjoy it, I guess. But, I get on there to see something serious, and all I could find was, a kid riding a quad in a monkey suit eating an ice cream. And and this was continued, and actually got a little frustrating because, here's just a reality. We've been around the whole time, and everybody else is like all this supposition and guesswork and all this and that. And so I just decided to go ahead, and since I was frustrated with the treasure deal about that, and people basically pimping me out and using me for what I could do, I just threw the whole gamut at Bigfoot instead. And plus, we moved into a place a guy had seen one locally where we were at, so it brought all that to the surface, and that's what got me looking. And then we moved into a trailer house, just kind of in the pathway of this little family and a subject, and it just went on from there. And because we were right there with them, and then we ended up being where there was a family unit just within 2 miles. And I started building recording gear and stuff like that, all kinds of different stuff to be able to track them and listen to them. And then we ended up filming them and all that. So it just kind of went on.
So yeah, I want to stop for a minute, because I don't know if you're going to say it or not, but you did you found that there was a need to build equipment to help track these, to help find these, and so you came up with your own invention, your own things to help you do that. And so, you know, that's one of the things I like about you is man, you just don't do the status quo, man. If you think you need something and it ain't out there and you can figure out how to do it, man, you build it.
Yeah. Well, you know, our first one was a a dish, 36-inch snow dish, and we mounted it 22 feet off the ground above a little mobile lab. Little, you know, 52-foot semi-trailer, but mobile laboratory. And we were tracking the big male of that group going from the mountains down, and a younger male, but going from the mountainous areas down to where the family unit would hang out. We would track them and listen to them as they progressed. And, you know, so it got eventually, you know, we took it another step, but actually Boyd Omer, I'll give him a shout out because great guy, inspired me to start creating the real high end audio sampling equipment, you know. And so far I've been hit up by a couple of militaries and everybody else over it now. So,
Cool.
you know, if I can get the right backer, there's no telling where it'll go. I've already, because, you know, I think we got about 65 of them out there, something like that. And, you know, I'm getting talked to from groups that are, you know, would order hundreds or thousands of them to use in defense for passive sensing systems so they can hear things coming and find them and whatnot, you know.
Cool.
So yeah, it's kind of gone off the rocker, but it all started because, you know, when I go out there, I want to know personally. I'm not here to like go show you the best I can get or hopefully do this and that. No, I don't want to do that. It's like we do treasure hunting. It's, you go for broke or don't even go, because you learn after a while the rest is a waste of time. And so, you know, we just did that, and applying everything we know how meant also, well, you know, we deal with a lot of tech guys, a lot of backdoor science guys doing all the analytical work from high-end treasure stuff and all that. So you just get around a bunch of different tech and a bunch of stuff, and, you know, it all sank in at some point or another. And so, you know, start plopping it off what you can do.
Cool.
So yeah, man, you want to get into it? Well,
let's get into show these guys, because like I say, I was absolutely blown away of the things that you was talking about and showing, and things had been covered up and all that. So get into your research and show us, because there's a lot of guys out there like me that thinks, you know, Bigfoot can't be real. You know, they as many people's in the mountains, they never found one. They, you know, they don't, all the pictures are blurry and da 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 da. Anyways, go into your research.
well, and to not drag it on too long, but to top on that just a little bit, that's exactly why we did what we did, because people are looking and are interested and do have them doubts and all this and fear sometimes, or they've heard something, this and that, and it's bugged them for 20 years. And I think it's a big deal because they don't know. What do they do when they go look online? They're finding kids on quads with ice cream cones. Of course, they're not getting any type of closure or any type of anything out of, you know, any fundamental gratitude. You know, they're not getting anything out of that. So we wanted to provide that, you know. So, but kicking it off too, we've ended up pushing on the wrong doors quite a bit, being at the levels, working with Oxford, working with University of New Mexico and these other big groups. And we've had senators propose law trying to stop us from doing our research, and we've had all kinds of things happen. So it's hard to get the word out there. I mean, if you get too close to an actual truth, as long as it's a well, if and a maybe, and that was a good guess, well, that's fine. But if it gets too good, you know what I mean?
You start to show proof, man. They shut you right down, huh?
They shut you right down. Yeah. And they don't even take a chance anymore. Like, nope, he's going to accidentally do something, you know, right. So, but anyway, you know, hopefully this helps out, because this is a different look, and we didn't approach this from the same angle anybody else did. I wanted to know, but at the same time, I wanted to go out there and just dig up the unbiased answers. So I really hadn't even, when we did most of our research, hadn't even looked at anyone else's studies, field research, or anything else. And I never went and saw any presentations or conferences, you know, and I've done several now. And we hear, like you said, that they're good and people appreciate them and they're one of a kind. And I think that comes, we truly come as kind of a representative for people. Oh, what if you guys can't get out there, but what all would you do, and where would you look, and which rock would you lift, or whatever, if you were out there? We kind of try to be those extended hands. So saying that, I'm going to lead into an introduction on the presentation. So this presentation was originally developed a few years ago, and it's been altered ever since. And the latest upgrade to it was even after the Moon Lake gathering at Bigfoot and Brews in Michigan. We just got flown up there. by some great people from a uncomfortable podcast. Eric up there is just an amazing guy. Everybody up there is. And so they brought us up and we did a deal. And so this was just revised and updated for that. It's the same presentation, a little bit better. And I'll be happy to present it to you. And it's a culminative of work since about 2011. 6 years solid research went into, like I said, a family unit, with literally hundreds of outings in a year, because I was doing this full time at that time. And we did that for several years, about 4 years running, and then off and on for 2 more. And of course, now that's been 13 or 12 years since that started. And so a lot of this stuff comes from that span. And then there's a few new things in there as well that were added recently as we're getting better at doing this and throwing in. So with that said, I'll go ahead and
cool, man. We'll get it up here for these guys to see this.
So this is a Bigfoot under the term Homo sapiens cognatus. And what that is the scientific determination that it's classified under in Zoobank Genomic Library. And under that study's good. It's across the board. It's excellent. And it basically solves the question, do they exist or don't they exist? And so ecology, behavior, and man versus ape. And those questions, of course, have been asked by people over time. And then we're going to throw in a little bit on the DNA and more the question of the DNA. The study regions, the Southwest USA, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Michigan. And as I said, this was prepared for Bigfoot and Brews, and it's presented by myself, Robert Kryder of Kryder Exploration. I'm going to start off with a quote by Sir Conan Doyle. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be truth. And consider that while you watch this evidence or while you watch this information that's being presented to you. First section is ecology. We're going to start with diet and acquisition. Diet, something we don't consider often when we think about what these creatures are eating or how are they getting a year-round greens sources, and what are they doing to do that? And what we found is, often even in places that are covered in snow, if you go out there enough and you realize you'll brush snow every once in a while on the side, and there'll be like a leafy green under the snow in specific areas. And some have that ability to retain that long through the freezing process that they can acquire. Algae, as we see in both of these photos, algae is an extremely important, very important food source. It is loaded with all kinds of good stuff. Now, you and I necessarily wouldn't want to go eating this just on a regular basis unless you've got the gut to handle it, because of what else it can contain. It's going to be full of microbes and full of all kinds of life. But at that point, if you can stomach it, it's highly nutritious. You're getting basically everything you need. And what we've seen even in wintertime where they've eaten just algae and sand alone because they couldn't get anything else, and the riverbeds were still had algae, even recoverable in some areas under ice and snow.
So Robert,
go ahead. Yeah.
So do you care if I derail you a little bit? So
no, man, that's what we're doing. That's why I love this.
How do you know that they're eating sand in that?
Well, because that's what they crap out, man.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
So when we find their defecation or their scat piles, yeah, they'll have just consumed sand. We look at what they're consuming. It tells us more. We'll go over that in a minute, but yeah.
Sorry for derailing you.
No, you're good, man. And please do. This is great. So I don't normally get to do a back and forth when we do this. So Russian olive fruit. This is an example of substance. So when biologists say, what do they eat? You have to have enough calories. Excuse me, there's a mosquito or something flying around. You have to have enough calories for this massive mammal or group of them to be living out there like that. And something that needs to be considered more so is where or where do they find their food, and what are they eating, and what are the biologists considering as a substance? So what we see in this situation is these guys will literally live off Russian olive all year long, and it'll fall on the ground in wintertime. And the picture on the right, you'll see where it has a very big seed, a very big pit, which prevents a lot of animals from eating it because it's extremely bitter and you don't want to smash that pit. And then there's very little meat around it. And so these things will lay all over the floor underneath the Russian olive trees, and they're very durable. They'll lay there and just dry up a little bit. And so they're available all winter. And so we can actually follow during those months, we can kind of follow the family unit around just by seeing where these are all being collected, because by the end of winter there won't be any of them on the ground. They'll have all of them removed. They'll just go through sections and wipe them out. And it's unique because a lot of animals don't have the dexterity to go through the leaf litter and just pick just those out. And so, but I mean, other animals will eat them. You'll see even coyote picking at them, or deer, stuff like that. But not generally, because they're going to try to chew them, and they're so bitter. Now, what we see with the Bigfoots or whatever is they just swallow them whole, probably mouth them up good and swallow them, and then they crap them out the same way. Now, another thing about that, I guess, about the Russian olive fruit is also it's invasive. So tons of the water corridors all over North America are filled with Russian olive, and it provides unbelievable resource for foliage shielding. So because it has 2-inch thorns all over and it grows really, really dense, like in that lower picture, it's very difficult to see in there. But at the same time, it hollows out on the inside, and they modify it on the inside so it forms all these tunnels, and then they clean the floor of all the thorns. And when they go back into that area, they'll do it again. They'll clean everything. So it's very unnatural to go into these places, and it's absolutely clean. You could roll around in there. You could walk around your hands and knees, and there's 2-inch thorns everywhere, but there won't be anything in the little passageways and little cells in there. Oops, we're gonna go. So pine nuts. This is another thing that they subside on. So even some of the names more for them mean pine nut or pine nut man. And so it's regard to them consuming massive amounts of the pine nuts. Pinyon pine throughout the Southwest is prolific all over, even in the desert regions. As long as you get a little bit of altitude, pinyon's really, really common. But the other forms of pine nuts as well offer plenty of nutrition, and even the pine needles represent, vitamin C. So that species of tree, anywhere they are, these guys could subside. Juniper berries are another kind of off the wall food source, and they don't eat them often, but even the coyotes will consume these at a very specific time of year, and they're real astringent. But what they'll tend to do is they prevent things like gastritis, and they help intestinal issues. Yucca stem and base root. And this is another one that, like, a biologist would probably, or most of them would overlook immediately, because they don't realize how valuable this is as a food source, but only a really tiny specific part of the plant. And that part being the base right above the root stem. Now, the root stem is good too if you strip it all down to a little core on the inside, or if it's young enough. But 99% of these are aged plants. And so what you do is you peel off. They're very tough, though, extremely tough, but you peel off the leaves, and then you bite the very, very bottom section, and you get both water and you get an edible little portion of the plant. And I've consumed them a bunch of times when we hike. And there's no bad taste. They're not bitter or anything, as long as it's just the bottom. And what the picture you'll see on the left is showing yuccas pulled from the ground, which is very difficult to do, and snap them off, and then stripped. And there'd probably be, over this entire area, if you were to look at all of them, probably 1,500 yuccas representing over a period of time had been pulled and done this way. And then the picture on the right is actually the teeth marks from a large hominid. So they're not a teeth mark from anything else, but as you'll see in following photos, they're exactly the size and form of a human, just about twice the size as a standard human. So another big part of their diet are birds. And I show a woodpecker here because if you got woodpeckers, this is one of the first things that they go for. And one of the unique aspects of them that you can tell where they've been feeding on birds is they tend to pile all the feathers in a pile, like what you see on the right.
Really?
And that's the same species you see in the photo on the left as the feather pile on the right. Yeah, and they're real anal about it. You won't find, unless the winds kicked them up. And even these are a little more distributed. But see the small tufty feathers in there that you could just blow around just with a little breath. Well, this is on the in a floor of a cell inside salt cedars and Russian olive, in an occupation cell, and you just have this little pile where they're not anywhere else, and there's no portion of the bird, be it beak or feet or anything, but wings or anything like that. And you also, there's never any blood whatsoever on the feathers. And then like I said, they're always piled neatly like this, and they do it all of them seem to do it. I mean, every time we find them killing and eating birds, this is what you find.
Huh.
It's really, it says something about their psychology that they'll sit and pile up the feathers neatly. You know, it's pretty weird. So something else that's odd, excuse me, is and most, you're not going to find this in most animals, scat, and that's porcupine. And you know, a lot of animals mess with them once and then usually don't ever do it again. I don't know of anything that effectively eats porcupine, but we have found, and in, like as in the photo on the right, which is a part of a scat pile, the extreme lower right of that photo, you can see is it's extreme, very fresh scat. This is not very old. It's on wet sand. And in there are two unique things that tell us a lot about what's going on here. One, it's porcupine quills and skin. And two, there's Russian olive fruit in it.
Mm.
So we have, and there's nothing else. So you have an animal that could eat, consume, and pass porcupine with quills and all.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, and it's just one of the aspects of how big and tough these creatures are that they're doing that kind of stuff. It's like when you watch a mule chewing on like a palo verde or some other form of cat claw or horrendously horrible plant with thorns and things, and they're eating them and munching them up. And you're like, or it's like grass burrs and things to a rhino. They just eat them. They don't even care. And we're like, oh my God, if I step on that, I'd die. And these things are crunching them up and eating them. So something else that you could readily imagine, and it's easily predictable, is deer. And they're extremely good at getting deer. So they can apparently get deer whenever they want to get deer. It's not a big deal. And you can tell by what we see as the remnants of the way they hunt and where they get them, where they get the parts, how much of them they use. And in this case, this was taken during our lodge expedition on my way down the mountain, and it's super fresh. The bones still contain moisture, and it still has a little bit of flesh on it and all that, but it was only deposited there maybe within that week. And what's unique on it are the bite marks on it. So it's extremely clean. There's not a single canine pressure mark or scrape anywhere on it whatsoever, from a cat or a dog or anything like that, or a bear or a wolf or whatever. But there is the telltale hominid bite marks at the end where they bit the knuckle off the end of the bone, and you can see those in that flange on the right hand photo.
Huh.
So, and here's another example. So livestock, and that should be predictable. Usually they don't seem, they're very intelligent. I think they're a type of people more than they are anything else. I'm pretty sure. And the DNA comes back and agrees with that. But we have an animal that normally doesn't cause problems that will bring a problem to it. But a lot of animals are actually conscious of that. So that's how they stay hidden. Big cats, wolves, and things like that will not mess with easy opportunities often, because they know it's going to bring back a bad response. But in the cases that they do with livestock, we all have seen everything from horses to large cattle and things like that are taken every once in a while. And in this case, we have a large cow bone deposited just on the ground all by itself. Again, absolute no canine or scratches or marks or nibbles or anything anywhere on the bone at all. But the bone is completely displaced. No carcass can be found within a quarter of a mile of it. So something carried in this hunk of meat and bone and then deposited it when it was done. And of course, the only telltale signs on this bone are the large hominid scrape marks at about a half of an inch or a little more wide that you can see there on the photo on the right. The grubbing logs, this is an important part. We know bear and a lot of other animals do this, and it's a great deal because you can get all kinds of things out of this, more than what you realize, not just the grubs themselves or beetles. But in this case, what we see is an example of something that a bear did not do. So an elevated log like this, a bear would have a very hard time digging into the upper half of the log only, and not ever digging into anything lower than the halfway at 50% mark. That means whatever it was over the log, approaching it in a downward fashion. And we actually have seen in this case as well, where pieces of the wood were picked up and set to the side on top of the log. And then there's no scratch marks, there's no claw marks or teeth marks or biting or anything to have tore the log open. You can take the pieces and whatever it was, put soft pressure and tore into it like this. And of course it comes with other evidence, but it tells a big difference between a bear doing this action and the bear's pretty much at this level anywhere where you have a log 30 inches thick and the top 30%'s been totally removed. That's beyond a wolf, because wolves will dig into logs for grubs too. So, but that's beyond anything that a wolf, and only a bear is out there big enough to do that, of course. And this wasn't done by a bear. Now, digging with sticks. So this takes us into methods and tool use. And we can suppose that would be crows use tools, and a bunch of other animals, even pigs, have been known to pick up and use tools, believe it or not, during studies. So we should expect it. But here we have a great example. In the lower left photo, we see the hole that's being mentioned that was excavated. And then in the lower left, in that photo, you see the stick that was used to excavate the hole. And you can see where the end had been all scraped down and everything. And in the hole on the picture on the right, you can see the actual dig pattern and marking. And what you'll see that's different from any other animal is there's symmetry to it. There's spacing, even on all the excavation marks, have a symmetry that people do because they know how far you move over to take out the next amount of earth. But animals just go whatever they're going to go to and dig. They don't even think about that. And here you can see linear dig scratches, all of them spaced pretty even, regardless if they're on the top, the back, the sides. And so you can see where these, and plus we had some feet print out front of two of the smaller subjects, not the great big ones, that apparently had come up and dug this rabbit out of the hole and threw the stick on the ground and took off. So projectiles is another method of hunting where they'll take, of course, small rocks, even large rocks, and use those as projectiles to take out game, and can be extremely effective at it. I know we got hit by a rock about 1.5 pounds that was doing about 50.
Really?
And if it hit two people, it striped my buddy Junebug, little Navajo brother, striped his stomach, and just barely, and then hit me. Yeah. And if I hadn't had big winter gloves and a big winter jacket, and my gloves were in the pocket of the jacket, and I was bent over like a damn catcher's mitt, and it hit me, and it still knocked me backwards and Charlie horsed my whole side. And yeah, it came out at like 67 feet, and sidearm chucked it.
So I've heard, that they throw rocks, but I've never really heard that I heard that they just kind of do it to play with you or scare you, or I haven't really heard of anybody being hit with them, but they actually try to hit you and you got hit. And
yeah, and it was a younger subject. We were in amongst an entire group. So there's videos on our YouTube channel. It's called MJ13, and this occurs in part 2. And the video is not that great because it was an interlaced video, and in those days they didn't have the stuff to process it. I need to re-release it. But you can see its eye shine. It comes out from behind a pole only 67 feet away and then hucks it. And its eye shine's about 3 feet off the ground, but this is a young subject. So it was probably would have stood 7 foot or something. And we watched it come up. We could see it was full moon. And then the camera, we got an IR camera. So you see what the IR camera sees, not in the shadows and everything, what we were looking at in the full moon. But we were watching him come up and down. And, you see Junebug reach back and start to pull the knife out of his pocket, or out of his sheath at one point, and you see my fingers go up and I push it back in the sheath and tell him to pull it, man. And we had subjects all the way around us. And then when they threw the rock and hit me, then I acted dumb and stood up and threatened to throw it back, which is stupid. And then we backed up, and 3 sets of eye shine come out on the road right after us. And it was a younger subject, and I think it was just nervous and being stupid. There was big ones there, and the big ones a lot bigger than that, and the big ones didn't do anything until I kind of got pissed off and threw a rock at us, and then we backed up. A couple of them came out.
So you mentioned your website or your YouTube channel or wherever this video, where can people go to see this?
Oh, it's titled KX Kryder Exploration, and that's same spelling as my name there, and we got it up on my little screen. And you just go there. You can even Google it. We've got stuff everywhere, but most of the videos of that stuff is there, and some other ones. A lot of encounter videos where we're around them, or I'm around them. In the early days, we had pretty good night cameras. Then we have real good ones now, but you'll see, a lot of the daytime stuff in there is not that great. It's being filmed with phones and whatever cameras we could get our hands on, and that progressively got better. So, but anyway, as we carry on. So this is projectile use as well. but this is for large game. And this rock, so there was a whole sequence of tracks. This is when we collected DNA for Oxford. They wanted it off a living subject as our second submission to them. They said, "Can you get one off a living subject?" Blah blah blah, with a hydrated follicle and everything, so we get good DNA. And so we tried. It took 2 months to do that, and it was at this place. We had probably 170 something feet print from this big one, and then two smaller ones. And we think the big one's old because we found bite imprints and stuff it left in food, and it was missing teeth and everything else. And these two smaller ones were moving game slowly. Deer was just walking, but they were coming down behind it, and he was crouched lower on the hill facing upward, and apparently had this big rock. And then when it got down and turned in front of him, then he apparently hit it with this big rock, because the deer tracks stopped there. They don't go any longer. The brush is kind of smashed right there where whatever went down. And then we never did find where this rock came from. Everybody gathered around and went a big circle around this, a couple 100 feet all direction on the hill, on the slope, and never found where it picked up the rock. So whatever it was carried the rock to that point, and then apparently used it to take out the deer, because his tracks were there, even his handprints where he was on the ground on all fours. So that takes us on to talking about tracks and things. Go to the leftovers, what they leave behind. And on the left there, you'll actually see a print that was taken that same day by that guy who chucked that rock. And those prints are in excess of 20 inches, or about 22 inch. On the right, I'm giving an example, and this is titled What to Look For. And often people see what they expect to see as tracks are what we see on the extreme right, where it's just, a handprint and a footprint, and that's all you got. Well, that's not necessarily what they leave behind. So people say, well, there was no feet print. What this is, the other forms that I show there is what's most common. That's what they leave behind, because seldom are they on full hands, and seldom are they, not seldom, but less often are they on full feet, unless they're going somewhere. Then you're probably going to have to just encounter a track, a single track where you walk across it or whatever. But in an area where they're not moving and being transient, and they're just hanging out doing their thing, these are the other forms are the marks you look for, because that's what they're leaving behind. They're on quad, they're on their butt, they're on their knees, they move all over on the sides of their hands. They're like little gymnasts rolling around on a gym mat. To them, stepping on the feet's not as convenient. Basically, is just moving on all fours from point to point and picking and eating and doing that. So this is generally what we find. Now, knuckles and fist marks is the first parts of track. So in the lower left hand of this one, you see two imprints, and they're from the one we show as a large female. And those prints, as you can see, are about 8 inches across, the print itself. And then they're spread almost, over 3.5 feet, almost 4 feet between the spread. So you can imagine, put your arms out in front of you, what's comfortable, and put your fists out, and you'll notice the angle of the fist is just the same as us, that's comfortable. And then the spread of your fists are probably 22 inches if you're, and maybe 24 if you're a big guy, and these are almost 4 feet. So everything that part of this is similar to human, but it's just scaled up massive. On the right, this was photographed there at another site where there was an ambush of a small elk. There was a large elk and a small elk. Something grabbed the small elk. A huge fight went on, or at least it was kicking like crazy in every direction. There was dirt 20 feet away on top of all the plants. It kicked so much dirt up. But whatever this was is what had grabbed it. And what we see here is a portion of the fist. And then all that is the section at the top of your knuckles, right across this section right here. That's all that is what we're looking at. And it's 4 inches long. That's a big hand. That's a really big hand. But that's what was able to grab a small elk, whatever left that. This hand is from the adult that I showed you, the feet print that I mentioned before. We were tracking the one for Oxford. And the lower left-hand photo is my palm, my entire hand in its palm. And on the right-hand photo is the width of its palm, and it's actually 8 inch. So the length of my hand is the overall basically it was the length of its palm alone. And so its hand was 16 inches long. You can even imagine that. And so if they were going to leave prints and tracks, what do you expect to find? And you need to expect to find them basically all sizes, and what do kids do and young animals do? They play. And even since they try basically not to leave prints behind, they're very, very aware of their sign. Um, the young ones are often an indicator. So we can find these things because they're not being careful about it. And in this case, we have tracks that are made from an infant on its knees and pushing itself forward with its hands on its knees. And it defecates a little in the trackway there, which is kind of funny. And then something picks it up out of the sand at the end of the trackway without leaving a mark. And in the riverbed, it was all kind of cemented gravel, cemented together with alkali and stuff. And so it's hard as a rock. But this sandbar that was sitting here that was raised, whatever it was, apparently reached over and grabbed this tyke up, but it could reach over about 6 feet, maybe a little more, and pick them straight up off the sand because there's no marks of where it went. And then here's we talk about the young, they got to have kids. So the track on the right is 4¼ inches long. And the ones on the left are just a little bit longer. I actually have that trackway sitting here cast beside me that was cast from those, but the prints are a lot different than a human, even though they look so human-like, it's ridiculous. But if you really take a close look at them, the morphology is basically completely different. It's just the same form tilted in a different respect in relation to the foot itself. So, but this is a toddler print, what we call toddler. So at 6 inches, it's kind of what our titles go. And what's neat about this is you can see how big the big toe structure is. It represents almost half the foot, just the great toe and the first metatarsal, that bone behind that great toe, which makes that ball of your foot there. That is almost half the length of the foot. And you don't find a human baby like that. You're not going to find basically anybody like that. The width of the foot is almost half the length of the foot. So what you see is the great toe to the back of the fifth metatarsal there is just about equal to as if you go over to the other side of the foot where the pinky would be. Then you have this big rounded, exaggerated fifth metatarsal where your pinky bone, the top of that one is. And this is all indicative of them. And then if you go from those two bones down to the center of the heel, you draw a triangle, it's equilateral. And our foot isn't like that. They step over step over step. They don't sway because they're going to get too big to sway. Once you get too big, that takes too much energy going back and forth. So they're real fluid. And this enables them to do that. So this foot can hinge directly forward, whether we have a 30-degree angle in the front, we kind of walk like a duck.
So I got to ask you, man. I'm afraid to ask you questions because I don't want to derail your presentation. I don't want to, so if you're going to cover it later, tell me. So I want to go back to you saying these things will take deer and elk. And I'm thinking to myself, if they're can take an elk, and an elk, for those who don't know, man, that's a pretty big animal.
Yeah, an adult's as big as a horse. Yeah.
Man, just a calf is a pretty big animal. An elk calf is a pretty big,
bigger than a big deer. Yeah.
Yeah. So if they're taking these elk, why wouldn't these people and like you that are going out searching for these be afraid that if they can take an elk, why wouldn't you be afraid that they can take you? And then that leads me to my next question. Have they taken people? And is that tied with this 411, these people that become missing in the national forests and things like that?
Well, yeah. So yes, and yes, and yes, and a whole bunch of those. One of the things I can note from being what we've done, yeah, they can be super aggressive. And if absolutely you can't even fathom the size and speed, I know because I've been there. I woke one up at 57 feet that was a monster with 23-inch prints. And I was photographing his prints when he was still 40 feet away from me, just a few minutes after they were left behind. He's still there, and he was tolerant. And that's how most of the big males are. They're tolerant. But where we went up and did our lodge kill zone expedition, trying to find this lodge we encountered years ago that I need to try to find again. And when I say by a lodge, it looks like a giant beaver dam. But everything up there is really big, 30-inch and thicker trees, 100-foot tall. These are 18,000-pound trees pulled out of the ground and carried all over the place.
Wow.
And on a specific trail where this place is, we were told by a retired USFS guy that up to 30 people have vanished on that little trail in 1 year with no investigation.
Really?
And yep. And then so someone who joined on our last expedition to try to go in there, and it got screwed up by some kind of greedy bad people. But anyway, we're going to do it again. But a guy who joined that expedition is an active U.S. Forest Service manager at the time, and he managed a district in Arizona. And he was free to say, yeah, absolutely, Bigfoot. I've seen them. I know they're real, right? And but he came out and went up there with us and everything and did that deal. And I was able to confirm through him. He was public about saying it. He checked my information, and through his database, he found 37 people in 3 years. So he found a 3 year record of 37, but I was told up to 30 people in a year. Now, this is an ongoing thing. And based on what we see is up there, which just, it's like the giants. It's like all the big old men of this species, tribe, whatever, go up there and hang out together. And one of the reasons we didn't even get to photograph it is getting dark. We took a wrong trail. We ended up into this place. And we just wanted to get the hell out of there. And a few of the guys were vets, and none of them wanted to even stay and take a picture. It was not even like that. Everyone was just wanted to get the hell out of there.
Mm.
And that's why we're trying to return and go look at it, because it was so intimidating. And your body knows, your insides know when you shouldn't. You're prey, and so, and it's like that. So yeah, absolutely. I think that, yeah, they definitely take people every once in a while. Maybe not each one of them, but they're as different as anything else. People ask me, excuse me for that. I don't know if that audio came across there. I have no way to shut that off. If people have asked me, are they mean? And then I ask them, are parakeets mean? I mean, some parakeets are really cool, and other ones that try to rip your throat out being that big. So you can imagine the diversity in any species. The propensity to be mean is in anything. And so there you go. I mean, you have something that weighs, well, probably up to 3,200 pounds at the top of the scale. You have something, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds that's pissed off and a lot smarter than you and faster than you, and you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I used to never believed in Bigfoot, and I've never seen one or anything, but I had a guy talking to me about coyotes. I used to do a lot of coyote hunting, and he was telling me that coyotes, they basically only have instinct. If they had any brains or logic to them, you'd never hardly ever see them, only or hear them or anything, because their instincts or their sense of smell and sight and hearing and all that is so keen. And he says, and to prove that, he says, you take a guy that's got dogs and he's hunting lions, he runs them down a dirt road, and that dog can pick up the scent on that dirt road, and it knows from the one side of the dirt road to the next, which is only maybe 8 feet wide. It can tell you the smell. Its sense of smell is so great that it can tell you which way that lion's going from just one side of the road to the other. That's
Sure.
some keen sense of smell. Well, if a Bigfoot has that kind of smelling, hearing, sight, and all that, plus they have logic, you wouldn't see them except for by accident,
Well, and you make a very good point. I need to shut off something here. There we go. Sorry, I was getting some audio coming across. Hopefully that'll help. But you make a very, very good point. But at the same time, for the amount of what the population of coyotes there are, and they don't necessarily choose to stay away from people. They're pretty boisterous. If they think they can run by a quarter mile away, they're not nervous about it.
Yeah.
They're nothing. And to compare a coyote to something like that. So I believe dogs and coyotes and things like that are perfectly sentient. And I know they'll leave and approach you and leave on the other side of an object, so you never know they're there. Cats do that. They're aware of that long before they ever get to you. They'll sneak around and find a way to get to you behind a bush.
Yep.
And walk across a huge open space and keep that one bush between you and them. They're fully aware of all that. All of them are fully cognizant.
I've seen that. I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I've had them sneak in, and I'm thinking, how did they get into there without me seeing them?
Yeah, they're that good. And the whole point is about just it's individual stuff. He probably has no clue how often that Bigfoot are around people and how close they get to people and they don't even sweat it. In the dark, they'll get within 10 feet of you they don't care. They know they're that good. They're not
Mm.
worried about it. They're like you and I are. And to compare that to a coyote, coyotes are skittish, and we catch them and we find them. And that's a lot because the coyote has a hard time living. Some animals have it pretty easy. It's no big deal. Just do what you do and you survive. Other animals have to really, really work to live. And with a coyote, that's one of them. And the more you get within 10 miles, 20 miles of human habitation, the harder it is for these animals to live. And a lot of guys are comparing these environments as well. They think that they're native environments. And if you have a forest with ferns, like let's say, everything, oh, that's beautiful, productive, wild forest. It's not. Fern's an infiltrator that grows back after you cut the forest down. Once the forest gets fully mature, you'll barely have ferns. You might have moss, but you'll barely have ferns. You'll have a little. And the point being of that is most people have never seen virgin forest, and most of the forests in North America were by about 80 years ago were all cut down. And so we've had 80 years, 60 to 80 years of regrowth, and it takes 80 to 100 years of regrowth just to have the environment where it will carry, let's say, species like a wolverine, or a grizzly bear and things like that. So we used to have grizzly bear in all 50 states. And it's not that they shot them all, it's that they took the environment out to where it couldn't handle the grizzly. But what we see from a Bigfoot is they're so much better at existing than these other animals are, that not only can they make do after the other animals are gone, they can do better. But they're still more intelligent. So you're not going to run into. A matter of fact, it's kind of a miracle you ever would run into them, being with how many there is. And I say that population is probably higher now than it's been in several thousand years, because most of the land in the continent is now abandoned. It never has been before. There's been people here for 10,000 years, thick, everywhere, every canyon, every valley, all over the place had people. But now there's no one out there. You could walk for 100 miles now and not run into anybody in the more backwards country. And but you're finding evidence of people. You find Indian arrowheads, you find shards, you find little walls, find a queen of little canals, and all this stuff everywhere. But now there's nobody out there. So they have an easier time occupying a vaster area now than they probably ever have.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that, but yeah.
And they're just good. And people don't want to see a Bigfoot. That's the thing too. They don't mind saying, "Oh, I saw a coyote." They don't even want to know they saw a Bigfoot. If it's a different trip.
So that, and like I say, man, sorry about. I don't cross over on your presentation here. So you say they can be within 10 foot of you. The story I hear is that they have a strong smell to them. Is that not always the case then? Because if you had that strong smell, wouldn't you know they was there?
No, it's like anything else. A well-kept dog or a well-fed dog doesn't have an odor. A poorly fed dog or one that's stressed has an odor. Things like that cause a lot of foul odor in species and even in people. Somebody starts stressing out and sweating. So there's a lot of individual trait to that too. But in our part of the country, we have plenty of forests and whatnot, but we're not wet all the time. Matter of fact, mold doesn't grow really anywhere. And so you're not going to have that same type of deal that's happening, and you have dirt, and it's a whole different aspect. So we've smelled them before, but you got to be within 50 feet and directly downwind. And then as soon as that whiffs away, it goes away. We're in the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest and other places we've done work and heard stories and whatnot. And even in Florida and other Louisiana, East Texas, they tend to be a lot more odoriferous or whatever the hell that word is. Anyway, they smell a lot more and than ours do anyway. So and it's pretty understandable. It's like, even the deer here, you go to other places and you could smell deer, way easier than you can here. It's just drier, just less moisture all around. So you just don't have that.
And then one other thing, like I say, if I say something you're going to cover later, just tell me. But and I used to think this, and I've always heard this, and I used to think this, well, as many people are up in the mountains, man, why don't they ever find a dead one and whatnot? And I get thinking about it. Well, as I spent a lot of time in the mountains, a lot of time, and in my whole entire lifetime, I've only seen 3 bears in the wild and only a couple mountain lions, and I've never ever seen a dead bear
Right.
or know of anybody that I know of that it's ever found a dead bear. So, and I'm sure there's a lot more bears out there than there are Bigfoot. So
Millions. And I mean, and there has been millions the whole time. And right, exactly. And it's something to point that out, is exactly that. So I know that from talking to a lot of professionals and doing different things, that there's never been a bear skeleton found that was proved to die of natural causes. So it's always something, whether it's starvation or something weird like that, that's caused them to go out. And there's evidence of that in the bones. They've never found where a healthy bear has died and anyone ever found the bones, at least not a biologist or a naturalist. And I've never heard of anyone finding just a bear skeleton like laying on the side of the trail or anything like that, or big cat. And you'll notice that predators, you don't find skeletons of predators because nothing's killing them at random places in the forest and leaving them lay there and consuming them.
Yeah.
So they're going to places where they live and places they feel safe to die. They're old, they're sick, whatever, and they go take and cubby off in a hole somewhere if they have a chance. They don't just walking around the forest one day and fall over dead. And so I think people don't understand how that works. And it's kind of like fossil record is the same way. People say, why aren't they in the fossil record? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's in the fossil record, the actual fossils, there's only been one fossil of a chimpanzee ever found. And it's 3.75 million years old, and it's just a jaw fragment. But you know how many billions of chimpanzees have been alive since 3.75, or I'm sorry, million years ago?
Yeah.
In 3.5 million years, there has been an awful lot of chimps, man, a lot. And that's it. That's all we got. So, and that's why when you say like the fossil record or a bone record is not just a poor representation of species, it's not a representation of species, because of how rare it is for anything like that to last. A bone's gone super, super fast in nature. It doesn't take long. Cow bones are one of the longest, because they're a huge, heavy bone that's real dense in calcium and very, very big. And they go away pretty fast and they're random. And then there's also, you're looking at an animal that's probably a people, not probably a creature, of some random critter. And in that case, based on all the other social stuff they do, it's likely they do something with their dead and be whatever that might be. What do you think?
I like it.
All right, well, let's go on, man.
Okay.
We got more to get to. Let me get my cursor up. So here's a juvenile at 9-inch. And what's unique about this is in the picture on the right. Well, in the picture on the left, you can see that in the prints look different. And some they look flexible, and others they look perfectly flat. But that great toe structure is still really exaggerated at this stage in their life. It still looks way too big for the foot. And in the picture on the right, if you look about mid-foot, just to the right of center, you can notice a circular pattern. And that's a macrodermal ridge. That's the dermal pattern in the foot. And we don't have that circle there. That's something that they have that we do not have that. No human has that pattern. So we have a pattern as well. And it's certainly not as robust either. And then you can see this is with dead winter. So the foot looks kind of deflated a little bit. And then this is an adolescent at 10-inch. Too young at 9 to an 11-inch. This is adolescent, or I said juvenile before. This is the adolescents around 14 inches. This is just when they're young adults and they're just not quite old enough to get out on their own fully. And this subject here, actually, we'll see his prints because they were gathered over the years, but we'll see his prints as they get a little bigger here. And this is actually him. But this is a young adult. This is the stage when they pretty much leave and they can go do whatever they want. And we find them occupying zones all by themselves, like they'll have a mesa or a mountain or something just there on. And this is a 17-inch. And so we know his eye shine was over 9 foot when he came and visited us at camp during this one point. And this here was actually, we put a game cam at this location, and this guy was throwing snow in front of the game cam at like 3 a.m.
Really? So like
he didn't walk.
He knew it was there.
Yeah, it triggered it, and then probably see the red glow. I mean, especially in the snow, I could see most game cam lights. Now, if they're 940 nanometer, not so much, but if they're under that 550 and 850s, Yeah, I can see him. So apparently he triggered it, caught the glow, or saw the red and stayed out of it, and then was throwing snow in it in the middle of the frame. So, and then yeah, we got his prints. But 17, that's my boot print next to it. So you can see how big. And he's just what we consider a young adult. So the alpha female of the group we studied for years and years. This is her foot. We believe this is probably max size for her. And on the left there, you don't realize that the bottom print there, the size that it is, but the top is my boot print, and the divot at the bottom, or looks like kind of two divots there, that's her footprint, and it's right at 20 inches long.
Wow.
And she's just massive. And here you can see the well in the picture on the right, you can see the weight, her coming down this slope, this talus slope, and she's pushing into it and breaking the earth out. When we walk up and down that, we scuff it maybe a little bit, but we can walk right up and down that without leaving a mark. But she's probably 1,800 or 2,200 pounds. So,
wow.
Yeah, you can fit. She's 40 inches or so across the hips, and you can fit two people in one of her legs. I mean, that's just how big she is. And this is the alpha male's foot, and he's got this is 23-inch foot. The picture's on the left, and 6 years of intensive study, those are the only marks we got of his. He was moving, and plus they're so damn big, and he covers so much area, you don't recognize tracks, and he can step over stuff that you can't even walk through. And I keep having a notification thing going off, and I can't shut it off. That's
well, that's all right.
So, but he could do this. So he was moving in places we couldn't get him, and he would come in the winter, and then the ground's all frozen solid. But in this point, he broke through the ice, and the stick that we're looking at on the ground in the lower left photo, that's 7 feet. So it's 8 feet between that gap and 8 feet to the next. And then from the last gap to the bank, it's 12 feet. And he made it to the frozen bank. So, but he broke through the ice is about 4 inches thick, and nothing else has broke through it. I think those are raven tracks there in the snow, and nothing else has broke through it, and coyotes or anything else, but he punched through every time he hit it. He punched through. Then after, well, this wasn't even that long ago. It was probably 10 years. We saw one print. My buddy spotted the first print. I went in back the next day by myself, and I woke up this giant dude, and he sprang up, I mean, faster than you can imagine. That's what's crazy about the mass and the speed. And that's when I thought I was pissing myself after it happened, because I was shaking so bad. My legs and wanted to run, but my torso I had good. We're sticking. But my legs, man, they were shaking. They wanted to take it out from under me. They tried to carry me home. And then it was so bad. I was in there for an hour and 45 minutes. But after I tracked a little one for a minute that was on my left, and it ghosted me. And then I went back around and went in where the big one had flushed, and just kind of went in slow, checking it out. And he didn't leave. He stayed there. But this is when he had gone through and gone from quad to biped for about 4 steps, and went back down again. And he left these prints. And the print on the right is 23 inches long. And it's amazing. I mean, the size is pretty, and to be looking at that and taking the picture, and he's 40 feet to my left, breaking stuff. And it's all on video. It's called Waking the Giant. But if anyone goes see it, you don't look at the normal one. You got to go look at the extended version of it, when we went back and examined the area and picked up evidence and hair and all that. It's much better, because I go in that one and I show his head, because he peeks up over the brush at me, or at the camera. I got my arm all the way at the top of my arm with the camera looking over the brush, and he raises up and looks at the camera, and then turns and raises up another couple of feet. And he's huge, like really big, but he's hard to see, even though he's only 40 feet away. But he's plain. But anyway, but that's in there, and he's pointed out, so people should check that out. And that takes us on to our next section here, and that's going to be foliage manipulation. So we see in what's pretty popular is structures where they've created apparently things for different purposes. And people say, oh, well, that's probably humans, somebody going out. It could be, but these are found by the thousands in remote locations with no other human sign anywhere near them. No fire pits and nothing like that, not that they're not where people go. They're often near where people go, but you don't see the other remnants of what would be there. Strings, anything tied, nothing dropped. If somebody was putting a tarp over this, like the picture on the right, it's not a very convenient place to put a tarp. They didn't make it very well to put a tarp on it. It's just like a bunch of sticks. But it makes a little surrounded shelter you could get into or whatever. And then on the lower left is the same ones in the background back there is marked with a circle and the yellow line, but there's a smaller one that was built. And about the only thing I could think you could stick in there would be like a turkey. And then of course it was knocked down. Eventually they fall, or I don't think they knock them down. I think they end up falling to some degree. Another shelter we see them making are sunshades. Where we are, especially in the desert country, sometimes you get into places where midday there is no shade, and you're not going to get any for miles around you. And so we've seen things like this where they've taken brush and trees, packed it all together, tilted it over an area big enough to basically get underneath it and get shaded or get out of the sun. So breaks and twists. This is probably the most popular, and it's also the most overlooked too, because this is how we tell a lot where they are and when they're there. So breaks on the left, or in a habitation area when the family's in there, they'll mark these, and they'll do it every day. And I think it's so when the big males or the other family members come in, they can find the group, because they'll do it, like I said, every day. So you can go in there and find where one's been broken 3 days ago and the leaves are still green or whatever. You can go in there and find where they're minutes old and they're still wet. And that's when you know, well, they're here at this time. And then you can go in and sit down, and if you just sit down and shut up, they're only going to sit there and shut up for so long before, if they're awake, before they start moving around and doing dumb stuff. And so that's often how we get in on them. The picture on the right is this is kind of a romper room zone, but this type of tree, this type of damage is done to cedars and other fibrous wood, where they'll twist the living shit out of one. There won't be any damage anywhere else. They'll just absolutely destroy one, and they'll twist it all up. And often they'll do different things with them. But in this place, it looked like the kids had played here, where there's a lot of damage around and things like that. And if you look in the very top of this photo, just right of center, you'll see a blue and white object back there. And that's a basketball. That should not be down here. There's nothing else from people here. And it's aired up, fully fresh basketball. It's not dirty. It's nothing. This, whatever did this tree break about the time, is probably as long as that basketball's been in there. So basically somebody raided a basketball and brought the kids home a toy. So we have rub and scent posts. These are really unique. They're often on the outside of really thick areas where it's difficult to make access into the foliage. And you'll have an area dissimilar tree or something that kind of stands out, and they'll go in there and snap the top of it. Often, if it breaks over, based on the species, they'll break it. If it'll twist, they'll twist it down, and then they'll rub into it. And as you can see in the detail picture on the right, it's full of chestnut colored hair. And that's what that is. That's Bigfoot hair. You'll notice that color it's not a deer. That's not a bear. That's not an elk. That's not any of those things. It's a different color than all those creatures. It's a redder than any of those guys are. And it's not golden like a cat, but it's the default color for this species is chestnut brown, and which is exactly what that is. But they'll do this action to these things, and then they'll rub scent in them, and apparently, and at these points are where corridors go in. So you have a vast area that's really thick and really hardcore to get through. And behind these type of scent posts, you'll find it might look thick at the front, and then you go poke through just a little ways, and there'll be a cleared out spot where you can just cruise right on through it.
So you think it's more of just a scent way for them to know which way to go, or do you think it's marking the territory? There probably not a lot of other Bigfoot in the area where a family unit is, where they would mark the territory, or is there?
Yeah, not like that. It's more like, here's where we are. This is the area we are, and they'll do it on a corridor. They'll do it on somewhere that the other ones are traveling on, and they'll do it year after year. Sometimes they'll break and twist these trees like this, the same one year after year after year. Sometimes, so and hair will last. I mean, I know I've gone back and photographed a hair cluster that was still there after 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, the hair's still there. I don't know if it's got any scent on it, but it's still there. And sometimes they'll do it again with what tree like right next to it, fresher and like in the later in the year. And then we've been able to find 3 or 4 of these in a single day one time, once we understood where they're putting them. Then we went to other corridors that it's where you enter the river system. So it's like where another tributary might come in, or a path of travel, or a grove of trees. Somewhere that you can travel down will come and bisect the river. And at the points they come in on the travel corridor, there'll be one of these deals. And I guess it's just to show this is an occupation zone. It gets us to mark territory, but not like maybe to be mean about it, just to be, hey, family, this is where we're at. So these are barriers and blinds, and these can be pretty considerable. This is off the area where the people, up to 30 people a year, have vanished. And I mentioned that only because the gravity of the size of what we're looking at. So they'll build barriers and things for deer and to run deer out of either large trees or even small trees or whatever, but then they'll use them to quietly funnel deer in a method to bring them to an ambush point or a zone where they can be grabbed, and probably without trying to alert the herd much, because often in places you go and there's deer, most of where the Bigfoot are, the deer aren't scared of people. They'll walk right up. They'll hear you coming. If you're not talking, you can walk all you want, bust trees, do all you want, step, biped, step in, and walk right up on them. If you start talking, they'll alert. And I think that's really odd, because it's like they're used to bipedalism. They're used to people, things out there, until they realize you're not something that they're familiar with at 30 feet. And then they freak out. So I don't think they run their deer. I think they take them in the dark, and I think they take them as quiet as they can and don't alert the herd. And then I think they protect the herd and keep it going. And in this case, these trees had been laid down in a type of a barrier, and then there was others that set up as blinds that you could get in behind. And I only have so many photos to show. So, but the trees here on the right in the photo, that the one on the left is all one tree. It starts in the left-hand frame, and the root balls on the very right hand of that frame, the small frame at the bottom. That's one tree. That tree's a little over 100 foot tall. And in the right-hand photo, the root balls there with the roots and things, part of the tap, and you'll see that there's a big clump of dirt in front of that. And that's because that tree was just brought in there and set down. There's no hole from that tree.
I was just looking at your picture and thinking, man, if that was blown over by the wind, where I can't see the hole where the tree uprooted from.
Right. And then look at the one lower right, that bottom of that stump. Do you see a hole behind it?
Mm-mm.
And then look at the one behind those two. There's one laying down, and you see another big root ball back there. Do you see that it's laying on top of another tree?
Mm-hmm.
It's laying on top of about an 8-inch thick tree.
Which I had a Bigfoot guy take me out on a little excursion, and so we went out and he found a place where these big trees were not huge trees like these, but I mean they were the jack pines, they're probably 6 inches around or so, that were formed kind of a teepee thing, and
yeah.
Immediately I've seen them a lot while I've been out hunting in the mountains, and I think, well, not a lot, but I think, the wind's blowing them over or something. They get caught in the branches of other trees. But he showed me, and then I noticed, man, that one of the trees was upside down. The roots was up in the air, and I'm thinking, no, that didn't get just blown over there. That was put there.
Right. See, now that's amazing. That's mind blowing when it gets to that. That really, really is. And in this case, the gravity of the size. And this is where 30 people a year have gone vanished, and then you can see the size of what's being done indicates what's doing it.
Them look like huge trees. Them are huge.
A tree that's 100-foot pine that size will weigh at 18,500 pounds. And that one on the far left's every bit of 100. It's well over 30 inches thick, and it's every bit of 100 foot long. And the one back there in the back is about 30 inches thick, and it's probably 90 or more. And so they're carrying in trees that weigh in excess of 15,000 pounds. They're carrying them around the woods, and it's so thick in there that I don't know how they're getting them through the woods, but that we can't find none of these trees here. Did we ever find a hole they came from? But there is an open corridor they made, though, a totally open corridor. And at the end of that corridor, it takes us to the next picture, the big picture here. So, and that's that giant big X. And this is taken from a ways away. You can see it. There's a little apple in the tree, but that X is about 60 feet behind that. And the X is about 90 foot tall. Well, and the stumps are about 28. One of them is about 28 inches thick on the right, and the other one on the left, but 22 inches thick. But that tree will weigh 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, and they build that's a formed X. And then on the lower left is not a big a tree, but it's probably just as big as an expression of strength and prowess. So that's why we call these territory and prowess. It's obvious this is a stopping point, and here's how badass I am. And these were at the same location. And what you've got is about a 30-foot pine tree. And we see the root ball in the lower left-hand photo there. We see the root balls lifted off the ground, set up against another tree. But the unique thing is, and you tell me if you've ever seen anything like this, is that's the tap root. Now, the tree still has all the needles. They're all dry, but the needles are still mostly there. Mm-hmm. And there's even little bits of moss and stuff where it pulled out of the ground, but it's not been pulled out that long. But it couldn't have pulled out dead. You ever seen a pine tree come out of the ground with a tap root? You ever seen a pine stump with a tap, or ever seen a fallen with a tap root attached? You never, they don't. It had, for one, when the tree dies, that's the first section to get soft. You're never going to get a dead one out. It'll just snap off. A live one will break off if you try to push the tree over, because that's what holds the tree up, basically. But to get one out like that, like it's pulling it out like a carrot. Something pulled that tree out, tap root and all, when it was alive, and then set it there when it was a living tree, and it dried up.
And I have seen where the wind has blown them over, and they leave big holes and break, like you say, the roots are broke off, and
and that I've never even seen a pine taproot exposed, unless it was where a slide of a hill came down and exposed one. It's the only time I've ever seen one before. I've never seen one pulled out.
So back to this and the structures that the little cages or whatever, what is there? I mean, there's probably no reason to knowing why they would do this or build this. Is just kind of theory. What do you think?
Yeah, over the years you can put it together, because you know where they're most active. Like in this case, you get used to seeing where things are, and they make perimeters. They'll make log perimeters. They'll do all kinds, and then they have, like I've seen on the perimeters, you'll have these teepee things, and you can go from one of those teepee deals to another one, to another one, to another one, to another one through the forest.
What do you think? I mean, these teepee things, they're not for shelter or anything. What do you think they're doing? They're just to mark their territory, or just?
I think it's marking routes of travel is what I think.
Okay.
I think it's done most where we're in country where it snows deep. And what they usually use are those bleach poles. You ever notice that? They usually use stuff with no bark on it. The bleached ones on the ground with no bark. That's usually what they'll pick up and lean on a living tree or something like that. So they'll be dissimilar from the normal stuff. There'll be those bleach poles. And we might have pictures of them in here. I don't know. Let's keep going. So, we're going to go on to defecation. So you might think this part stinks, but it don't. It's good. But anyway, so what we see is, the first thing is placement. And we have no problem finding where they defecate. Other people, I've never seen their stuff, whatever. Doesn't matter. So, but you'll see what we're noting here is where they put them in conjunction with each other. So seldom in the group anyway, they never seem to go alone. They all go as a group. And then one will generally go 20 feet away from the others. Maybe a sentinel, or he's waiting till everyone gets done, then he goes, or whatever it is. And on the right-hand photo, in particular, you have two piles about 6 feet apart, but you'll see where the tape is spread out. That tape is actually spread out along the tracks of that subject, which is the big female at 20 inches. And her spread between her steps there are about 4 feet, something like that, for a single step. But you'll notice those two scat piles with that. And then there's right between the two yellow circles in the large photo, there's one print from the smaller subject. So basically it's her scat pile and a smaller subject scat pile. And the most important part where we learn the most information about these guys is through interpretation. And it's not that tough. I mean, on the left-hand side, we actually see where this time of year, this subject had been eating juniper berries, but also something with gray fur, which could have been whatever. It could have been domestic. It could have been wild. But that tells you a little bit of information. It tells you that there was difficulty in finding other food sources because they're eating the juniper stuff, or they had maybe stomach ailment or whatever. And then they're as well acquiring something with gray fur to eat it. And that's not anything that lives down this river bottom. On the right hand side is even more revealing. The large picture shows us what's listed here as a grasshopper leg, deer fur, rodent bone, pinyon pine nut, and Russian olive seed. And so we think, well, why? How can this tell us information? Well, for one, we know that it's an opportunistic hunter. It's even eating grasshoppers and insects, right? Well, all kinds of things do that. And then it's also it can be catching animals like a rodent or a mouse, something like that, and as well have access to getting deer. Now we need to think and consider that all this was in one feeding period, because it's at being defecated at the same time, so at least within the same day. And then we also have a pinyon pine nut and Russian olive seed. This is probably the most revealing because where these two grow is at least 5 miles apart. So there's no pinon nuts within 5 miles of the river bottom where the Russian olive seed grow, and vice versa, because you have to go up in elevation and get up in the mountain slope to get the pinyon pine nut. This subject had left the river bottom, went up there, did all this, and came back. Now, this was with like 6 other scat piles, and none of the others had this stuff in it. They all had Russian olive seed, they all had insect parts, they all had stuff like that, a little bit of deer fur, but none of them had pinyon pine nut. So this subject apparently was one of the most transient subjects. Now we know from the feet print which subject comes and goes all the way up there to that mountain. And that's that one with that 17, and now has the 17-inch foot, probably 18 by now. So it tells us a lot about who's going and where they're going. So vocalizations, and this is a kind of a cool part here. I'm gonna gas on this, and I seriously hope I don't get reverb on the mic. I don't think so. Through Zoom, I don't think we will. But if I could reach my speaker, I would turn me way down here. Let's see. So let's move on to our recordings.
Is it playing? Because I'm not really hearing nothing.
You should be. Yeah, are you hearing nothing at all?
No, I'm not hearing anything.
Now, does Zoom not take, will Zoom not play the sounds from this? Because I can hear them on my computer.
It should pick up off your computer sound, I would think.
Okay, I'll try something loud. Tell me if you hear this one.
Oh, I hear that. Yeah, I heard that. Maybe I'm just deaf.
Or here this. No. So I'm sure I would think your listeners would be able to hear this. So I'm not sure why it's not coming across. Let's see how the volume on these. Now they're jacked all the way up.
Okay.
So should we play them or?
Yeah, play them. Let's see.
Okay. So this one is an isolated howl. It's been isolated electronically and put through some filters because it was long range.
Yeah, I heard the beginning of that one.
I wonder why it's quiet on your side, Terry. Oh boy, that's too bad. So what that one is a Bigfoot howling, and then the family, 2 other family members howl with it and kind of harmony and resonate with it. Now, if we're not getting it across to where other people will hear it, I hate to sit and do this to them.
Yeah.
Well, then what do you say? You want to just go on to the next setup?
So tell me how you got these. So you got in amongst them, you got into the area, and you just used your one of the equipments that you built to record them, hear them, and
yeah. Matter of fact, most of these were done with the big dish that was on top of the on top of our lab. And so most of those are from that. So all these are from the original studies. Like before I developed these finished models of what I'm selling to people now, this was still in the early days of all tracking the members of the family and listening to what they're doing. And just some of them are really cool. The I don't know if this one will go across or not.
Yeah, I heard the beginning of that one.
So that's a subtone. So really most of that's more infrasound than it is audible sound. So like you have them on big speakers, it'll just reverberate and rock the speakers. It'll like shake your chest. It's really, really low. This is another one that's similar.
Yeah, I can hear the very beginning of them too. So let me ask you this. So do you go back and play them exact sounds back to them, and do you get any kind of response that make them mad? Do you get them curious? Or do you get anything at all?
No, yeah, and I just don't do any of that. Um, it's just not anything that I take part in. So, because I mean, I'm gonna be the fool. They're smarter than that. They
Yeah.
know that, no sense in trying to trick them or anything. I'll go out there and tell them, hey, yeah, or whatever, and acknowledge their presence and stuff like that. But no, I don't try to like bait them or anything, because it's
Okay.
like it's a kind of like silly human. You're an idiot. They'll sit there and watch you all day do that.
Yeah.
And, if they don't blatantly make a sound that you're going to hear with our little feeble ears as humans, you're never going to know they're there anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, great, I could go out here and make myself obvious and they could look at me, but I kind of want to get to know them.
Yeah.
And I think that, like a lot of animals, that you want to be out there and be somebody cool that they want to be near and be curious about. Not somebody out there banging on stuff and playing their sounds back to them. It's almost kind of embarrassing, I think. I don't know. I don't see anyone really. I see call responses at a distance people get, but to me, it's just like they're freaking out over because they got this little thing. And well, you could get much, much more. Be patient, and just go out there and sit down and experience and whatever. You'll get a lot better than that. You got this little response. Oh, cool. But really, it's almost like cheating to get the little bitty reward instead of
Mm.
working a little bit and getting the big reward.
Yeah.
The stuff we've got to hear before. I've got somewhere there's a recording that we have of one eating something or gross, I guess, because it sure sounds like it. Because he like, grunts a couple times and he and starts
Oh
screaming.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And I don't know what it all means. I mean, it's just like high speed monkey rushing, but yeah, it sounds like as if you had eaten something really, really bad and then were just disgusted, needed to get it out of your mouth.
Uh,
Who knows what the deal was, but that's what it went into. So let's move on so we don't be here all night. The next thing is foraging. And the way they do this is they move as scattered groups searching for individual and group food resources. So they'll spread out in a little group over a couple 100 feet in a thick zone, and they'll just kind of meander through that. You may have seen turkeys doing that. So
mm-hmm.
turkeys get in a big open field. They'll just about line up like a search party, and they'll be 3 or 4 foot apart, and they'll just cross the whole field like that. And they're getting everything in the field. And it's kind of what they do. They'll move through an area, kind of keep track of each other a little bit, and just kind of progress through, picking up what they can. Gathering, consuming food while searching without collection. So that's something that we've seen them do, where it's just foraging and they just eat as they go. And that's also like maybe going to places they shouldn't, even farms and things like that, and eating while they're doing it, for whatever reason, but not seeming to take animals as much as eat while they're there, kind of sort of thing. Collecting and delivering food to sedentary individuals at camp. And we say we're confident that they do this because we found food delivered to what we believe was the big one from the Oxford study that was from the valley floor, and brought all the way up there. And the only one that had any teeth mark in it were his. And it was interesting to us that we didn't think that he was going down to the valley and getting it. It seemed more like that they were bringing it up to him.
Huh.
Using top methods of plant animal hatch and migration times and stages. So we've seen where things like gypsy moth hatchings, you won't have much activity on a slope or whatever, and just during the time when the hatching, right before the hatching is going to happen on the big grubs and the gypsy moths, they'll go up there and be flipping rocks that are 300 to 1,000 pounds,
Mm.
and mining out all the grubs out of them. But they seem to
Wow.
know when that's going to occur. They just go nail it, and only on certain slopes.
Mm.
So it's really interesting that they know how to do that. And probably the only way you can suppose that they would figure that out is if it was being taught one to another, generation to generation, and not just something they're independently figuring out. Because
Yeah.
you could live there your whole life, you wouldn't know when and where the gypsy moths came from.
Yeah.
Search is an individual subject. So they'll often do that, like the young adults and things like that will search anything from roadsides to camps to by themselves, whatever, because they're finding food without having a group method involved, either cooperation or with part of the other group. So hunting, they'll use cooperative hunting techniques for small and large game. We've kind of talked about that a little bit. They'll funnel and direct deer into ambush positions by use of foliage barriers. And we've kind of talked about that as well. And we've seen on sides of mountains where they'll do this kind of angled down the mountain, and it'll go to maybe a deep wash or a ravine that you can use as an ambush point. And they'll run all the deer down into that at a kind of a gradual angle down the slopes. A lot of thought going into this. Funnel and direct deer activity, presence of vocal reports. So we've experienced that too. So they don't just do it to people. They'll funnel people in and out of an area they're in by doing vocal reports and scaring them out or whatever. They'll also do that to deer. So they'll go ahead and whoop and do something that definitely alerts the deer to make them move, like more rushed. Construct and utilize sound traps to locate both prey and danger. These are crosshatch patterns, usually 90 degrees to each other. So the crosshatches of foliage, where it'd be branches 2 inches thick, whatever, something like that. And they'll run them parallel to the trail, right in the trail. Then they'll cross that and then do it again. And then they'll fill them up with leaves. So you can tell somebody made them when you're walking, because they're right in the middle of the trail for one. And they're all made in a crosshatch form. And the thing is, they're like 8 feet long. So you might be able to run and jump over them. Certainly not going to with a pack or carrying anything, but they can pretty well hop over these things pretty easy. They don't make any noise. We have to make noise getting through, and they do it in places where you got a bushwhack to get around them. And I think what these are is probably for hunting deer on the trail, because the deer progressing on the trail, they step in and through those things, and it's leafy and it makes a bunch of crunching noises. And then that way, and the when you pour it on the sticks like that, the leaves stay elevated, so they stay higher and more crunchy. But it's certain when we step on them, we're stepping on the sticks and everything else. We make a ton of racket doing it. Build rodent and small game traps fashioned as nesting sites. So a few times we've seen what looks like with rocks and with stumps and stuff, to where they'll set them in an open area and stuff a bunch of grass under them, and you can tell it's whole clumps of grass and stuff. It's not like what mice and rats go stuff in them. It's like what somebody pulled a clump of grass out of the ground and went and stuffed it up under a stump. And the whole stump, you can pick it up and put it down, and it'll be on hard ground. And we've seen where these things have a rat's nest built or mouse nest built in them. And sometimes they're sitting upright and other times they're laying over. And so that's all we can surmise is that's a perfect way to do it. You can do that, set it up, and then come back and check those every once in a while. And you know, mice and stuff are when they're in their little bundle, you know, you just reach in there and grab and feel them. If they're there, you got one. Occupation. So they'll utilize an area about 2 square miles for a 5 to 7 day period as a family group. And this is just what we've seen as average after that 6 years in there with them. It's so they would the overall area could be quite a bit, but when I say 2 square miles, I mean because the riverbed systems, what I usually do is give about a mile for the width or a half mile for width, and then that area of length in the foliage and trees that surround your river bottoms, that's about how much space they'll stick in for 5 to 7 days, if there's plenty of substantial constant food source like Russian olive or something like that. Utilize an overall range of approximately 100 square miles of family group. So we'll see where up and down the river throughout time, as they make their seasonal moves up and down and just change in positions due to game and whatnot. Overall, if you add it all up, it's about 100 square miles. And then the family unit would usually, well, I think we might even get into that, would usually have, you know, so many members, not be huge.
So back to the family group, do they do like some of the animals? When they get older, they're no longer kids or whatnot, they kick them out of the group and they got to form their own group. They do that, or they stay as a family group?
I think probably both to some degree, but what we've seen is like that young male that's on the mountain that's 5 miles out. He's up there most of the time, and he just kind of comes back every once in a while. And then the younger ones that are just under him with like the 15-inch foot, but well, George, that's the last his foot was grown to when we measured it was, but they're still with the family group, but they run out of there and do stuff and hit the farms and hit other crap.
And then come back.
Like, yeah, but they're always, every day you can still find them with the family. And so I think that the individuals, yeah, I think that it's just same thing as us, you know, you just want to get out. You know, you don't want to be told all day to duck and hide from mom and whatever and shushed and, you know, whatever. You know, you're a young man, whatever, you want to go out and do your own thing a little bit, be in charge of your own crap. And so what we see where he's at's not near as opportunistic. You couldn't raise a family up there where he is, but he can come down real easy and get water and do the things he needs when he needs to. But up where he's at, there isn't any of these resources. So it's, yeah, it's kind of a natural deal, I guess, progression. I don't know. I don't think they get chased out, maybe, but you don't really ever hear the audio of like fights, or things like that. We've heard what sounds like literally like verbal argument with an interjection from another subject, but never ever
Really?
aggression. Yeah. Two of them going back and forth, blah, 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 all fast. And then one at a different place go yell, blah, 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 and the other two shut up till he gets done. And then they go right back to it again. So it was almost like two of them arguing with somebody else. Hey, would you two shut up over there? And they listen and then they go and argue again. That's what it sounded like.
Huh.
So they'll also change areas, impact grows, and resources diminish to non-adjacent. So they'll move and use with the Russian olive or freak out the deer or do whatever they're going to do. And then they'll usually move to another area that's not right next to it. They'll usually go down a ways and leave a good wild space between their last occupation point, and then they'll kind of range in again. After overall range due to seasonal weather and point of game migration, so we see that. So they'll move around based on weather patterns. And as well, like I said, even with the gypsy moth stuff, as the game go up and down in altitude based on the snow line, they'll also go up and down in altitude. They're more, all their activity shows to be following where the game is often. So utilize high rugged areas as retreats for solitary or group of large males, which we've already kind of discussed when we talked about the other parts. And what I mean by that is it's more like Native Americans are the same way. They had kivas and stuff where all the men went. Women were allowed in there. So get all the men away, somewhere for the men to go kick it, where they're not hearing the kids run all over the hell and they're not being asked to do chores or whatever. It's the same thing as like the biker club or anything like that, where the men all just get together just to take a break together, or apparently. So grouping, which some of these will be covered, we've already covered. So they'll form family units of 7 plus minus subjects with females lead, male mostly absent. So you could call it kind of a matriarchal trip, but I don't think it is. I think that mom's the mom and she's the boss when the big boy ain't around. Big boy's there. I don't think anybody questions who's the boss. It's kind of like that type of thing. He doesn't act like the female does. The younger subjects don't act the same to people like me or whoever when he's around either. They'll show aggression when he's there. So that's one thing I experienced that was new to me. They'll form large subgroups of young to hunt. Forage for the unit often cause trouble. So we've experienced this where we thought we were recording in the riverbed with them with recording equipment and thought that we were recording only one subject making animal mimics. And then it ends up to be a group of them. And I mean, you could hear 7, 8, 9 or more, and they didn't sound old or as giant or large as the other ones. And it was almost like they were messing with us, doing a crow, and they did a horse whinny, and they did all these other little sounds.
Really?
And yeah, and then a couple of them started like making barking noises, and then they went into full on hoops, and then all of them started hooping like crazy apes, and they went busting off through the trees and stuff like just breaking rampage and shit, doing that like
Man,
a bunch of kids.
Scary.
It is. Yeah, we're sitting in a car with a microphone on a turret on the roof. But you have the same thing happen when you're out there. It is to a point, but you kind of get it. It feels like you're just being messed with by teenagers. That's what it felt like. And then when they ran off, they were just all going bananas. Like it was, it was almost kind of comical at the end, but it was interesting. But they'll form smaller subgroups of 2 to 3 older subjects to hunt large game and raid. Now, this is what we've seen out of like what subjects we call George and Amos in them, to where I think that they're more mobile than the other subjects. They've got better aggression and things like this. They have more training by then. They've learned more. And so they'll go out as small groups and go work deer and go work other animals. And we see that by the deer sign and them working them. Males often move a few miles away alone when young but fully mature. And we've discussed that about the adolescent male or the young adult that lives on the mountain by himself. He stays, like I said, pretty close to the family unit. He's not that far away, just so many minutes for him at night, really. But when he's fully mature, we assume he'll move on. Large males often retreat to the highest regulated dense areas together, and that was inferred
Again, by the males wanting to be away from the family unit, just doing their own thing. But usually it's in places that you just can't believe. Like, we're finding the stuff at 9,000 foot and above, and where they have somewhere very rugged or a big river or something between you and them. It's somewhere they know nobody's going to go walking up on in general. And that's where they'll all be. That's why people see like 7 to 9 foot and up to 18-inch prints. And then they're thinking, oh, well, that's as big as they get. It's the big size. And it's not. They get bigger than that. It's just they're not mobile when they get that big. They don't run all over the place. So this brings us to the next segment of our talk. And that's the van versus ape discussion and the modern view and curriculum and classification. And for our source, we're going to be looking at a book called Through the Lens of Anthropology, the second edition, copyright 2019. The section will be Introduction to Human Evolution and Culture, Chapter 2, page 50. The reason I bring all that up is this is current curriculum for anthropology. So if you're taking anthropology, Tara's getting her master's right now. I'm doing her graduate studies and the whole 9 yards. And this is what she's doing, and it's current, it's new, and this is their true view. When we look at how does science see them, you look at the media, they convince you that science says, oh, they're bull. Even in the Bigfoot world, all the Bigfoot enthusiasts think that science thinks they don't exist and thinks they're bull. This is from the latest curriculum. This is the deal. This is the way it really is. In which this book, they have 2 pages, one little section there dedicated to Bigfoot. But to summarize, we take the last paragraph because it usually closes everything else in a paragraph. Like you want to decipher a riddle, just read the last 3 paragraphs and read them from the last to the next one up backwards, and usually break any riddle. And this is the same thing. So we're going to look at what the last paragraph says here. It says that believers should be aware that if they do sight a Bigfoot, they should probably leave it alone. It probably isn't a large human-like ape. If it exists, it is probably a human who wants to be left alone, and no one should do it harm. Recall that if a primate is bipedal, as Bigfoot is typically reported to be, it is classified as human.
Oh, now, so this is in their book, in their anthropology book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, and this is the point. What this is going to self-reveal something. There's a huge argument basically out there, science, everybody else. If it exists, it's got to be this big ape, Gigantopithecus, or one form or another of an animal, creature, whatever, but a big ape. Excuse me. But in all essence, if it's bipedal, as you see here, recall that if a Bigfoot is bipedal. So what we want to take away from this are just a couple of keys. It probably isn't a large human-like ape. If a primate is bipedal, period, it is classified as human. You get me?
Yeah.
So the simple fact that it's upright and walking. Okay, now this is interesting because we have pros out there. One of them in particular has been in this and been the face of science and Bigfoot since the 70s, since 75. And so this person perpetuates that it's Gigantopithecus, it's a big ape, and he'll listen to nothing else. And he's a scientist. He's a professor, works at a university full time. The question I ask is, why would any professor, scientist, or anyone who's aware of anything like this ever say that it's anything other than a human? Because the only video he believes is the Patterson-Gimlin footage, which shows a large primate of some form or another. What is it doing? It's in an open space and walking upright during the middle of the day. But the same rate, the person claims it's a big ape of some kind or another. Well, there's no such thing as a bipedal ape. The moment a primate is bipedal, it's a human of one type or another. That's what makes us human. And people think, oh, bull. There was a lot of human ancestors that were bipedal, but they weren't human. No. They weren't Homo sapien sapien. They were things like Homo sapien neanderthalis, Homo sapien denisovan, Homo sapien heidelbergensis, Homo sapien florensis. They're not Cro-Magnon, but they're Homo sapien. They're human, which means Homo sapien. They're a bipedal primate, all the way back to Lucy. Those are still forms of humans. So the wordplay in this is, what is it? Well, it's a human because it's a bipedal primate. That's all we know. If we know anything at all, we know those two things. It's a bipedal and it's a primate. So we're dealing with the type of human out there. And anyone who says they're a pro or a scientist knows this. So why would they ever claim otherwise? The next point is we're going to talk a little bit about the DNA. So how do we know anything at all? And, you know, we were part of originally vicariously the Erickson study, which is what classified them and had been accepted by Zoobank Genomic Library under the term Homo sapien cognatus. It's not Homo sapien sapien, it's Homo sapien cognatus. And they've accepted it. So it's there. If you find a Bigfoot hair and they run the DNA and they compare it that, it shows up in the database as that. We also participated at the request of Oxford Lausanne Museum and the museum, or the Oxford Lausanne Collateral Hominid Project, which was run by Oxford University and Lausanne Museum of Zoology there in Lausanne, Switzerland. They did this project here, and it was worldwide and a big deal and everything. And the founder and the guy who ran the project basically lied to the public. And I'll go long story short. We put in one sample. It was from an unknown creature. They couldn't get the DNA off it, so they wanted another off a living. They held the study. Everyone knows it took they were two months late in revealing, because they held the study for 2 months while we got them one off a living subject, which is what's in the vial in the picture down there in the center of this frame. And that sample number was 25076, and it was sent into them with a hydrated follicle. The collection was witnessed by an anthropologist or an archaeologist at the time, a USFS vet of 10 years, and like 4 other people all witnessed the collection. Were all part of it. It was done with gloves. It was transferred in a hermetically sealed case, which you can watch the video of that on our YouTube channel too. All this was sent into them. And then when they released to the public, they told them that, for one, there was no unknowns found, and that everything tested was one animal or another, be it a polar bear. They found what they thought was a polar bear and a brown bear hybrid, and they said that's the Yeti. And then they did a possum, and they did a bunch of other stuff.
Really?
And but there we're back to wordplay again, because they should have never found anything. They should have never tested anything, because they said they didn't find anything was unknown. Now, when you do the hair, the first part of the hair is they run it and look at it through a microscope, and they identify the species. If it's an unknown, it was to be tested. They know what dog hair, bear hair, cat hair, they know what all of it looks like. It's easy. It's like a second-year biology student in college can easily use a reference chart and identify the hairs. As soon as you can learn to use a microscope, you can use a chart, identify the hairs. Why did they test a possum hair? Why did they test a bear hair? Why did they even test them? They should have been out. They should have been through the discrimination process. The first step would have eliminated those things. Now, what's odd, he sent us back a letter, still have it, that says that the first hair was from an unknown. Well, they stated to the Associated Press that there were no unknowns, that everything they tested was unknown. But they should have never tested anything known. You get what's going on here?
Yeah.
There should have been no study, because nothing should have been tested. Now, when I talked to Brian Sykes, the guy who ran this whole mess, Dr. Sykes, he tells me, I asked him, where the hell is our sample? Where did it go? And he told me that it was being curated by the Museum of Zoology in Switzerland for a future study. But what they released to the AP was that all the samples were studied. They held the study for 2 months to get that sample for that study. But it's a smoking gun. It's the one that you can't really show, because there's no way you can't say anything. You can't say it was contaminated. With it are the prints of 170 prints of 3 different subjects, teeth marks, all kinds of other evidence, physical and trace. And then we have this hair, right, that goes with all of that, and they can see how it was transferred and everything else. And here it is, and it's 7 inches long, and it's gray because it's coming off what looks like an old subject, but his feet print aren't robust. They're long and straggly. He's got missing teeth, and here's his long gray hair. It's just like too much. So they say it's being curated, and that's the question. I mean, anybody can contact the Lausanne, the Museum of Zoology in Lausanne, Switzerland, and ask them, or even Oxford, and say, hey, where is 25076 from the OLCHP study? Where'd it go? What are you doing with it? Because why would you wait 2 months to get one off a living subject with a hydrated follicle to then shelve it? You wouldn't. They wanted
No, you'd study it right now.
right now. That's the whole point. They waited 2 months for it, so you know they did. And that's the point, man. If people reach out to them, they can kind of catch them, because I bet they don't have this sample intact. I bet it's already been through the gamut. So that takes us, oh, go ahead.
Well, no, well, so do you think they did this study thinking that you wouldn't come up with anything, and then you did, so they just kind of shelved it, or what do you think?
They asked us to do it for one, which was interesting because a lot of people heard about it and then submitted stuff, but they asked us to do it. And then, of course, we got them the one, and the conditions it was under were 10,000 foot elevation on top of snow, on top of a Bigfoot scat pile, that nothing else left, with handprints and the structure and the whole 9 yards too. If they didn't want one for real, they wouldn't have asked us to get them another one.
So you think they wanted one for real, but they just don't want to release it to the public?
Damn straight. That's exactly what it was. And they wanted one with high confidence. And that's what they got. So the second one was just about indisputable. And like I say, it still exists, or the results do. These are major universities, which takes us on to the next little question here. So we also did a study at the request of and from University of New Mexico Gallup. We did a year-long Bigfoot field study, and we were requested by the executive director of the university, is the person who conducted it. And if you read down there a little bit there, where's our sample number? Well, it just says samples with a question mark, and then we were followed up by Dr. Meldrum, where'd they go? And I'm going to say that because this is the truth. It's no contempt. It's nothing bad. I know the guy just had a pretty bad time on a boat and everything else. He knew what happened, whatever. But regardless, the truth is, and the truth is this, people deserve to hear it. In the photo, we see a microscopic view done in-house with our own microscopes of the scale patterns on a Bigfoot hair, slightly different than any other species. These samples existed. They were physical. But the executive director, after we got done, and we did a presentation on it to the faculty and even students and some of the public at the University of New Mexico, the executive director was attacked for doing a fictitious study for fraud, and they brought him up on charges.
Really?
Fraud, yeah. And it was because there was no DNA evidence. He had nothing to present. So they said he defrauded the deal. But you can see the photograph is right there, right? There's a picture of a physical piece of evidence. And there's a word above it says, or a question says, where did they go? And we ask, why are we asking Dr. Meldrum where these went? Well, I'm going to tell you, because after a year, or during that point in time, I guess, while this stuff was being collected, the executive director gave the DNA, all the DNA, sent it to Dr. Meldrum, because he agreed to take it to 3 domestic laboratories. Domestic, because I had already worked on the Oxford Lausanne study, and we're damn sure not sending it to Brian Sykes at Oxford, which was expressed explicitly to Dr. Meldrum. These are to go to 3 domestic labs. It'll be paid for by the University of New Mexico. This is new university to university. This isn't somebody coming off the street and saying, hey, can you get this tested for me? Blah, blah, blah. That's not like that.
Yeah.
It's just being handed through a professional university to university to get these samples to their labs. He agrees to take on this responsibility. Then we don't hear from him for a full year while I'm doing the study. I mean, because at no point in time, I should say, during that year that the executive director reached out, would he answer the phone or respond, until we were going to do the results of the study and show these to the faculty. It started out just the faculty and students, and then we opened the door to the public, which is on the Navajo reservation, which also, for the first time ever that I'm ever aware of, the elders of the nation came to the event and told their stories and what
Really?
language the Bigfoot speak and everything else,
Really?
words that they say. Yep, sat right there and told the whole deal because they saw this as being for them. That's
Yeah.
why we did it and how I approached it and how I felt about it. Those people are my family now. And Mr. Meldrum, of course, didn't pass up on being paid the money to speak and have the opportunity. And so he came and he delivered. This is after not talking to us for a year. He came and delivered his presentation on Gigantopithecus and how it probably crossed over the Bering Land Strait into North America. Okay, but never ever once. And then I did all the results. I did 2 full days. He did like 4 hours. I did 4 hours the first day and almost 6 or 8 hours the next day, because we're delivering all of the results of the field for a year. And during not one point during that time did he ever even bring it up. And we purposely were just waiting, like, what in the world? How did he have the audacity to show up here and get paid and do this thing? And so anyway, at the hotel one evening after everything was wrapped up, before we were going to go out and about the next day, the executive director asked him at the table, we're all sitting there, and asked him verbatim, so where did all the material sample we sent you or gave you or whatever, where did all that stuff go? Where is it? Because I haven't heard back from you. And he, while eating, said, I don't know. And the executive director, everyone just went dead silent. He's still eating. And I couldn't take it. I interjected and I said, hey man, no, dude, there's no, I don't know. What are you talking about? Where's the trace of custody? Where did the stuff go? And he said, well, I really don't know. And I said, what did you do with it? And he said, I gave it to Brian Sykes. I'm like, what? Wait, what? And then I said, so where's the submission numbers? And he said, I don't have any. And he just keeps eating like it was no big deal, like it meant nothing. This is a whole year study. And then you can imagine, so just within weeks after this episode occurs, all of a sudden the executive director's brought up on charges.
Wow.
For defrauding the government out of $7,000, which actually the $7,000 was to put on the 2-day expose and all that stuff. And some of the study stuff, most of the study came out of our pocket. And it was discretionary funds for the college. So there was really no law broken. He could have done it on parties or even pizza. And he asked what they wanted to do it on. And everyone said, do it on this. All the public and the faculty all wanted to do this.
Yeah.
First real university full-on back deal. And here now you got guys brought up on charges. So the executive director's kicked way back. Holy shit. Meldrum, he's not saying a word. He's not saying like, hey, the evidence exists. Sykes has it. I was involved. I know what they were doing. No, not a word.
Really?
He's going to let everybody go down. So then the local news, it's an network affiliate there in Albuquerque, KRQE, puts on a special, and it's their special investigations, 22 minutes long, about this fraud. And we were plastered all over it at first. We saw the ads for it, and I wrote them and called them and told them, you're going down. We're suing the shit out of you if you put us in there, period. It doesn't matter. It's not news what you're doing. And so they took us primarily out. They still show me walking around, but our name is no longer in there.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so they had a specialist come on there, some guy, and he's a bigwig scientist. He runs a group called New Mexicans for Science and Reasoning, and that's all current and ex or former scientists and lab techs and stuff from Sandia National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, University of New Mexico, Medical Center Biology and Astrophysics. So, and these guys all make up this group. And so they were backing up the news thing and going to back up the legal case and all this, that this thing doesn't exist. It's a myth and all this. And they were going to you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? Cool. Let's jump into court over and let's bring up the fact that this thing exists or doesn't exist. So I went to their own group at a community college there. It's C&M, it's called, or CFM, I forget, but it's a community college there in Albuquerque, and did a 3-hour presentation to this peer group. Now, what they do is shoot people down in bad science down. That's what these guys do. That's all they do. They love doing this. After 3 hours, none of them doubted anything. You should have seen the response. they crapped. And I showed them all of this stuff. I showed them the paperwork from Oxford, showed them everything. I showed them all the stuff. I had hair from the study that I still had, which would have been the physical, here's the evidence, get out of here in court. I had that laid out with microscopes. I had tracks. I had everything there. I had the head of the biology department looking through the scope saying, I've never seen anything like this before. You know, and we had literally the head of the astrophysics department. All these guys were there. Well, it's run by a guy named Dave Thomas. And he was the guy that was on the news broadcast saying, yeah, it's bullshit. Well, Dave Thomas at the end of this thing stands up and says to the group, I have to ask us all a question. He said, do you think we missed this? He said, what's the possibility we missed a big primate? Now that got me, and it still tickles me to this day, because that's 100% off kilter from who these guys are. Then at the end of it, the head of the astrophysics department for the University of New Mexico comes up and says, what are you guys going to do afterward? I said, we're going to go eat. He says, I'd like to go eat with you. I want to chat, you know? So I said, cool. So I actually showed him some other things we have, these little 9,000-year-old alien artifacts deal. We'll get into that another time. And he wanted to see those. So I showed him those. And he told me that, he said, I'm going to tell you right now. He said, you could, if this would ever gone to court, you'd have smoked him. He said, there's not a skeptic alive that, you know, that's honest, that isn't going to pull back after watching what you presented. He said, and I'll tell you right now, if you could convince Dave Thomas or even make him even think it, he said, you did it. He's the most skeptical, hardest to believe person of anything that's not right physically pliable within your fingers. He said, anyone alive. And he said, you sold David. So
wow, cool.
Yeah. So I mean, that's where this went. But in Tacoma.
So I got to ask you, did they want to take you to court, and then they see, or did they want to go to court, and then when they seen what you had, they backed down?
Well, after we
was a public record.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is a state senator proposed law to stop any potential future research into mythological creatures. And that's what this whole group, or Dave Thomas, was going to be their expert to say it's a mythological creature. It doesn't exist. They don't have anything that says it exists. Well, so I went to that same group who was going to be their pros and showed them that it exists in the whole 9 yards. And here's the can of worms your guys are about to open. And now their experts couldn't have even gone on the stand and said, yeah, we're positive it doesn't exist. Now they had to go up there and go, well, maybe that's not going to work. So all of a sudden, all the charges were dropped. It ended everything. So there you go. I mean, but it leaves the question, why did this happen? You have this, who's the person we're looking at right here? He's the name of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Right? So this is not a personal jab, dude.
That's not very scientific to have hard evidence and not care about it,
right?
Not worry about it. Not, like you said, not have a chain of custody for it.
Yeah. And that's the normal. They don't accept something without logging it in. There's data comes in with it. There's nothing just gets laid on the table and then it's all accounted for. It has a number. Somebody's got a number for it somewhere, and it's a lot of material. It wasn't a little bit of material. What I showed during my presentation is excellent. I put it up against anything. I know what it is because we know where it came from. We collected it. And we know how it got there. That specific sample, but we had a whole bunch more, and it was probably all good because of where it came from. But so I mean, it was a lot. It made up a significant portion. That would have been blood, hair, saliva, the whole fecal material, the whole 9 yards. So, but that takes us on to the closing of this deal. And I want to kind of wrap this part of the presentation part up with a quote by Albert Einstein. It says, "The fairest thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and science." And isn't that really, when we talk about science and look at this and people want to scoff and think it's a joke or anything like that, and we look at scientists want to do the same thing. Why would a mystery like this, be treated as not part of what should be studied by science or taken seriously, when really the mysterious, as is quoted here, is the basis of science? That's where it all starts from. Without the mystery, there's nothing to study.
Yep.
But yet this is shunned and kicked to the side. And there's nothing that shows that it couldn't exist or that it doesn't. And such an amount that shows it could, and it probably does or does. And you have to see, where does that prejudice come from? I mean, and that's why people don't know. If they want to know why they don't know, it's this, and it's perpetuated. How do we know it's perpetuated? Because we have pros sticking on every TV show there are, saying that it's a big monkey if it exists at all. When for one, they know it exists and they know it's not a big monkey. So, I mean, I just want to expose the veil to people. They can lift it themselves. But first thing you got to do is know how to pick out the veil, right? So you know when you're being turned around, I guess, so to speak. So with that, this says thank you and keep watching. And this is our information for contact, and everything that goes with that. And give people a minute to kind of ponder it.
So I got a couple questions for you, but first, man, I want to thank you for sharing this with me, because it's opened up my eyes. You know, you hear the same thing with, you know, and I'm not a UFO guy, but I'm out of place archaeology guy, you know, the giants and intercontinental travel before Columbus and things like that. And they all say, you know, it never happened. It's, you know, sensationalized newspaper article, newspaper writing, da 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 da. I didn't think it happened with Bigfoot stuff, and it does. And they're shooting all this stuff down, and why? It's crazy. Leave your name and number up there for a minute still. But so here's my question for you. So talking about the giants, you know, one of the things they say, well, man, their structures, you know, if the giant, you know, couldn't even walk around, their bone structure would have to be, you know, that it wouldn't hold their weight. You know, it's just not even humanly possible. But here you got a Bigfoot that's like a giant. How tall does the tallest of these get?
12. That's though people say 13, 15, whatever, but I just tell people from what we experienced. I'm
12
not
foot?
You know, 12 foot. And then if you really do the real math, this is the honest math. It's a 12-footer wouldn't weigh 800 pounds or 900 pounds. By the time you put the human form, especially in good sized, bulky human form, at 12 feet, they reach 3,000, 3,200 pounds. Wow. Its lift strength, deadlift, would be easily 20,000 pounds.
Wow.
And its jerk strength or jerk lift would be in excess of 40,000 pounds.
Wow. So clue me in on these big feet. Do they always walk upright, or do they act like monkeys, you know, that they're down on all fours and walk
all
up?
the above?
All the above.
Totally comfortable in any of it. Yep. They can go arboreal. Even the big ones are like that. They're fast, agile, flexible. Imagine a gymnast ninja, and that's how they are. And then put them in a big Herculean football player's body with, you know, traps that beyond any human, basically. I mean, they're just like that. Their weights, in a sense, their weights almost irrelevant to their strength. You can see I got a visitor. Hi, Risky. How you doing? Come over here. Good boy. Here, good.
Well, with that said, Robert, if you covered everything you want to say, I don't know that I really got any more questions, but man, I really appreciate you sharing with this, and I definitely want to get you back. I know I want to talk about, because I know that you know a lot about Doc Noss and Victoria Peak and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned in this presentation about an alien thing. I'm not really an alien guy, but man, anytime, I'm a curious guy. So if you
believe it or not,
I want to talk about it.
It all goes together. Even the Victoria Peak thing has the same connection. I'll share with you some of that.
Cool.
Yep. It's hard to know anything about metals mining or any of that in North America, ancient metals mining in North America, without involving those little freaks, whatever they are, aliens, whatever.
Really?
They are. Yeah. We'll run it down, buddy.
With that said, Robert, man, I appreciate you, and that's a wrap.